Have you ever wondered what happens when a massive shipment just disappears? I'm not talking about a package left on the wrong porch. I mean tons and tons of cargo that vanish somewhere across the ocean. This isn't just a shipping problem. It becomes this huge legal mystery. And as we're about to see, it all comes down to the fine print.
So picture this. A company in the Philippines buys almost 10,000 metric tons of fertilizer all the way from Alaska. The ship makes its long journey, but by the time it arrives, over 100 tons are just gone. That is a lot of money down the drain. So the million-dollar question is, who pays for that?
All right, so our story kicks off with what should have been a totally normal business deal. But it's this huge shortfall in the delivery that gets the legal gears turning. Okay, let's get the lay of the land here. You've got the buyer, Planters Products, or PPI. They're buying a massive load of fertilizer from Mitsubishi. The cargo gets loaded onto this ship, the MV Sun Plum, way up in Alaska, and it's headed for the Philippines. Seems simple enough, right?
But when the ship finally docks and they start unloading, there's a big problem, a really big one. To be exact, 106.7 metric tons of that fertilizer was either missing or so contaminated with dirt that it was completely worthless.
So naturally, Planters Products files a claim for their loss. But the shipping company basically says, nope, not our problem. And that one denial, that's what kicks off this whole legal saga that goes all the way to the top.
And this is where a simple cargo dispute gets really, really interesting. Because when they took it to court, the courts themselves couldn't figure out who was right.
Okay, check this out. It's kind of wild. The first court, the trial court, looks at the evidence and says, yep, the carrier is totally liable. But then the shipping company appeals, and the Court of Appeals completely flips the script. They say, no, the carrier is not liable. Same facts, same missing fertilizer, two totally opposite rulings. How does that even happen?
So what gives? How can two different courts look at the exact same situation and come to polar opposite conclusions? Well, the entire case, and I mean the whole thing, hangs on one single critical legal idea.
And that one idea is all about what kind of carrier the MV Sun Plum actually was. In the eyes of the law, was it a common carrier or was it a private carrier? It sounds like a small detail, but it changes everything.
First up, what's a common carrier? Well, think of a public airline or a huge shipping company like Maersk. Their whole business is moving goods for anyone and everyone who's willing to pay them. They serve the general public.
A private carrier, on the other hand, is different. They're not for hire by just anybody. They're contracted for a specific job, for a specific client, often using a special contract called a charter party. It's kind of like chartering a private jet instead of just buying a ticket on a commercial flight. You've rented the whole thing for your own use.
And this right here is why that distinction is the whole ballgame. The law holds a common carrier to this super high standard called extraordinary diligence. So if your cargo goes missing, the law automatically presumes they were negligent. It's on them to prove they weren't. But with a private carrier, it's just ordinary diligence, and the person suing them has to prove they messed up. The burden of proof is completely flipped.
So the whole mess lands in the lap of the Supreme Court, and they have to make the final call on this one central question. Their answer is going to decide the direction of the entire case. So the carrier's big argument was this. Hey, Mitsubishi chartered the whole ship. For that one trip, we were a private carrier, which means you have to prove we were negligent. It was a pretty clever legal move.
But the Supreme Court didn't buy it. They came back with a huge ruling that basically said, look, if you're in the business of public transport, you don't just stop being a common carrier because one customer rents the whole ship for a trip. And with that, boom, the court officially declared them a common carrier.
Okay, so let's follow the logic here. The highest court says they're a common carrier. The law says common carriers are presumed negligent when stuff goes missing. So that's it, right? Game over. Planters Products wins, right?
Well, not so fast. This is a legal thriller for a reason. And just when you think you've got it all figured out, the story takes a final turn that nobody saw coming.
Get this. Even though they decided the company was a common carrier, and even with that automatic presumption of negligence, the Supreme Court's final verdict was that the carrier was not liable for the missing fertilizer.
Wait, what? How is that even possible? This seems to fly in the face of everything we just established. How can you be a common carrier, be presumed negligent by the law, and still walk away without paying?
And here's the brilliant part. That presumption of negligence, it's not a conviction. It's a legal starting point, and the carrier can fight it. And boy did they. They showed up with a mountain of evidence proving they exercised that extraordinary diligence. They proved the ship's holds were cleaned, that the hatches were sealed tight under 3 layers of tarps, and that those seals were never broken during the entire voyage. The ship was totally seaworthy.
So, if the fertilizer was safe and sound during the trip, where did it go? The court found the smoking gun buried in the contract, a tiny 4-letter clause, FIOS. It stands for Free In and Out Stevedoring. And what that did was shift the responsibility and the risk of loading and unloading right onto Planters' products. You combine that with the evidence that they were unloading in windy, rainy weather with a product that dissolves in water, and the court had its answer. The loss didn't happen out at sea. It happened at the dock, on PPI's watch.
So, after all is said and done, what can we take away from this incredible case? It actually teaches us a few powerful things about how the law really works.
The biggest lesson, without a doubt, is this. A legal presumption isn't a guaranteed win. All it does is shift the burden of proof. It sets a very high bar for the other side. But as this case proves, if you have overwhelming evidence, that bar can absolutely be cleared.
And this all brings us to a final, bigger question for all of us. This whole multi-year legal drama ultimately came down to a 4-letter acronym, FIOS, that was tucked away in the fine print. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? In a world filled with complex agreements, how well are any of us truly protected from the risks that are hidden in the details?